Mark of the Beast, Part 17. The Green Reset. In our last chapter, we began discussing the latest machine being used to erect the new Tower of Babel, what they're using to put up the image of the beast, what H.G. Wells and other one-world idol pushers have called the New World Order. That machine to raise the New World Order is called the climate crisis. To deliver their global solution, they will require a global crisis. It is no longer the population bomb, or nuclear winter, or a terrorist problem that requires an international governing body. It is carbon dioxide. As we stated, carbon dioxide is not a poison. We like to drink it in soda. Plants love it. People buy carbon dioxide machines for their greenhouses to make their plants grow faster and stronger. Only 0.004% of the atmosphere is carbon dioxide. Only 3% of all greenhouse gas is carbon dioxide. And only 1% of that 3% comes from humans. CO2 levels are rising, perhaps, but we do not need to worry about it. A CO2 level jump from 280 parts per million to 380 parts per million in the last century may seem like a frightening statistic, until you realize that submarine crews function just fine while breathing 10,000 parts per million. Compared to CO2 levels during other times in Earth's history, we are in a relative CO2 drought, according to climate experts like Dr. Richard Lindzen. And yet, governments around the world are waging war against CO2 and against the sun, calling global warming a national security issue and devising billion-dollar secret mitigation weapons against it. From the Bible's perspective, we do not need to worry about fluctuations in CO2 levels. The Bible states, quote, "While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night, shall not cease." While things like summer and winter may never cease, some things do change. God says that He does change the earth, kinda like a person that changes their clothes. In Psalms 102 it says, quote, "Of old hast thou laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of thy hands. They perish, but thou shalt endure. Yea, all of them shall wax old like a garment. As a vesture shalt thou change them, and they shall be changed." Ironically, environmental science backs up ancient truth, agreeing that the planet has been through many extreme fluctuations. Although unknowingly, environmental scientists are verifying the Bible when they show us shifts in temperature of up to 25 degrees and concentration levels of CO2 fluctuating during the Earth's long life. These large past fluctuations make the threat of 1 to 3 degrees Celsius from the environmental scientists seem insignificant in comparison. The largest fluctuations in temperature took place before man was even on the scene, but many other large fluctuations took place before the Industrial Revolution. This graph, for example, shows a warming period in the year 1200 and also shows that there was a miniature ice age around the year 1600 in Europe. This is a painting depicting that miniature ice age in which the River Thames froze over. Naturally, after an ice age, the fluctuation means that we will warm up. Scientists have only been taking the Earth's exact temperature for a mere 100 years, hardly more than a point on a graph of the Earth's age, and have been constantly modifying how that dubious procedure is done. And when one considers the plethora of confounding variables, it takes a busload of faith to believe that climate change can be measured and that the change of climate is coming from one thing and one thing alone, human activity. While human activity might be able to impact the climate, especially through deliberate geoengineering or weather modification, the supposed measured temperature changes that they are seeing are most likely attributable to decades-long storm and wind systems like El Niño, topographical changes due to population density changes where the temperatures are taken, cities getting bigger and going into the suburbs, natural fluctuations in clouds and other Earth gases, natural occurring disasters like volcanoes, the jet stream shifts, ocean conveyor shifts, the planet's tilt, orbital variations, changes in Earth's magnetic system, changes in the ionosphere and the atmosphere, the influence of other planets' locations. And, of course, the most obvious influencer of the Earth's temperature is the Earth's heater, the sun, whose behavior is often erratic and yet to be understood by scientists. Given this giant sea of uncertainty, it is no wonder that meteorologists are notoriously skeptical when it comes to climate scientists' predictive computer models, and they are the last ones to believe in climate change. These computer models of the climate scientists have an error margin larger than what is being measured. If there's one thing weathermen know about the weather, it is that it is always changing and cannot be accurately predicted, even a week or a month from now, never mind 100 years from now. Like a choose-your-own-ending adventure novel, the United Nations Environmental Panel works with government, Hollywood, and the media industrial complex to construct doomsday scenarios requiring the rescue from international governing bodies. If you watched the Leonard Nimoy show In Search of as a kid, you might remember that the climate crisis back in 1978 was, quote, the coming ice age. In the 1990s, budget-busting Hollywood flop Waterworld portrayed a future in which land no longer existed. This hoax was abandoned once word got out that a full melting of the Earth's ice would only raise the oceans by 10 or 15 feet. But National Geographic still scares us with images of the Statue of Liberty underwater. Another vision of the future portrays an Earth of deserts, too hot to live in. This also is difficult to sell, given the fact that fresh water exists inside of a closed cycle, evaporating and falling back to Earth, neither being created nor destroyed. Going one step beyond, the latest theory being pushed by BBC and Science is that global warming will cause global freezing due to a decrease in temperature differences, which will eventually stop the Earth's ocean conveyor, supposedly. Perhaps this change of endings is why global warming has now given way to climate crisis in the news media. Climate crisis has become an unfalsifiable theory because it is everything all at once. Whether your winter was too warm or if it was the coldest on record, it is evidence of climate change. The Bible says that God is in control of the weather. Quote, "You visit the earth and cause it to overflow. You greatly enrich it. The stream of God is full of water. You prepare their grain, for thus you prepare the earth. You water its furrow abundantly. You settle its ridges. You soften it with showers. You bless it with growth. You have crowned the year with your bounty, and your paths drip with fatness." Psalm 65. Even if you don't believe in the Bible, you should be able to look around and see that Earth people currently survive in temperatures that vary by 150 degrees Fahrenheit. So a 6-degree change will be palatable, manageable, and may even warm frozen tundra and bring fresh water to deserts, which currently cover 1/3 of the Earth's land mass. For the purpose of this series, we do not need to answer the question whether the Earth is warming and how much it is warming and what it is warming from. The question we ask is whether Earth warming is coming solely from human activity, and whether an international governing body that has wanted one world government for the past 100 years can do anything about it if people hand over all their freedoms and money to that governing body. One world idol pushers will claim that they are up to the job. Big international corporations, too, are happy to agree, giving 100 times more funding to green scientists than to skeptical scientists. By vilifying CO2 instead of vilifying actual pollution, like mercury, plastic, and PFAS, the corporations doing the polluting get a free pass and can keep polluting without being harassed. Meanwhile, they fund propaganda in the media and universities that declares that it is the consumers who are to blame, so that the taxes, the incremental restrictions to freedom, and the fines all get paid by the people, not the corporations. The similarities between the guilt-fueled agenda of the United Nations Environmental Panel and the Holy Roman Empire of old are striking. Consider the average person's guilty thoughts. I feel guilty and I want to do something to save the earth. I believe mankind is evil, especially those corporations, and we're destroying the earth. Mankind seems like a virus on the earth, And now the Earth's immune system is starting to kick in. We better do something. Indeed, Pope Francis pushed this popular threat in his first encyclical, which is about saving the Earth. He said, quote, "If we destroy creation, creation will destroy us." End quote. But at the same time, most people feel helpless and lazy. They think, I don't really want to change. I like consumerism a bit too much, and I guess I'm just too selfish to save the planet. Sadly, most people are not interested enough to learn the basic facts about the debate. They want an easy way to feel a little bit better, but without any effort. They want to be able to look down on those who are doing nothing. They would much rather just give money to someone else and let them figure it out. These feelings originate from the schools and from the media, who function like a modern Dark Ages church, dealing in environmental guilt and convenient indulgences. Like the Catholic Church's ban on reading the Bible for yourself, the environmentalist idol pushers also do not want you to read about climate change for yourself. Knowledge is considered dangerous to these con men. Instead, they want you to trust the high priesthood of well-funded experts. Why think for yourself when you can simply pay them indulgences? Ironically, even Catholic Cardinal Pell can see the analogy of environmentalism to religion. Quote, "The grim scenarios for the future as a result of human irresponsibility have a dash of the apocalyptic about them. The immense financial costs true believers would impose on economies can be compared with the sacrifices offered traditionally in religion, and the sale of carbon credits compared with the pre-Reformation practice of selling indulgences. Some of those campaigning to save the planet are not merely zealous, but zealots." Certainly, retribution from fickle weather gods who demand sacrifices and threaten you with hellish consequences sounds a lot like Baal, the Lord of Thunder. Presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg, who refers to eating beef and using straws as, quote, sins, says this, quote, "If you believe that God is watching as poison is being belched into the air of creation and people are being harmed by it, what does God think of that? It's messed up." Indeed, the weight of guilt is encouraged along familiar religious lines by media news channels like NBC, who actually encourage their viewers to visit their Climate Confessions website, where they can confess to blasting the AC or eating a steak. Richard Toll, International Panel on Climate Change, admitted that, quote, "Climate has become a new religion, and that people who disagreed with us would be treated as heretics." Indeed, if you question the dogma that 1, the Earth is warming, and 2, it's because of humans, and 3, the only solution is UN control, you are considered a sinner of the worst kind. The insult climate denier is used, calling to mind the phrase Holocaust denier in order to make people sound crazy. Amazingly, we are expected to ignore the historical ineptitude of every big governmental regulatory agency to date and have faith suddenly that this time they will come through with a miraculous salvation if we just simply hand over everything and trust them. The phrase, "the science is settled," is a good example of the blind faith of the environmentalism, which is reminiscent of what they told us about evolution. The science is never settled. Science always faces scrutiny and questions. Science never says, "stop asking questions." Like the diviners, the fortune tellers, and the soothsayers of the Old Testament, the environmental movement is teeming with false prophets in the media as well as in the political heavens. They see every extreme weather occurrence as an omen or a portent of future doom. Prince Charles has gone on record at various times to say that we only have 18 months to save the world, and other times 96 months to save the world, 100 months, 10 years, 35 years, 96 months, 33 years. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, meanwhile, says that, quote, "the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And your biggest issue is how are we going to pay for it?" Popular trendy scientists and science guys like Bill Nye, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and David Suzuki fill the religious role of TV evangelists, bullying dissenters with contrived scientific consensus, declaring that the science is settled and climate deniers should be locked up. Celebrities like DiCaprio and Schwarzenegger fulfill their role as hypocrites, flying across the globe in private jets and holding fancy gala dinners to support climate change. President Obama, who told an audience in Africa that they can't have big houses or air conditioners because, quote, "the planet will boil over," turned around and bought a mansion on Cape Cod that's only 15 feet above sea level. Since he can obviously see that islands are not disappearing and developers are building closer to the oceans than ever before, Obama most likely does not believe his own hype. Big Tech, too, does not seem to see any urgency of the climate change that they preach against. They're moving their operations to desert states like Nevada. Like the Pharisees of old, they do not hesitate to lay heavy burdens on their minions while never lifting a pinky to do much beyond signaling their virtue. But doesn't the Bible, after all, say somewhere that we need to take care of the earth? As a social justice warrior in the early 2000s, this author was known to use the Bible to force environmentalists on his fellows. After all, Genesis 2:15 says, quote, "the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it." This shows man's responsibility to be stewards or caretakers of the earth. Also, Leviticus 25 tells us that the planet belongs to God. Quote, "the land, moreover, shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine, for you are but aliens and sojourners with me." And the animals are his too. Quote, "for every beast of the forest is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know every bird of the mountains, and everything that moves in the field is mine." The book of Jonah tells us that God even cares about every individual animal. Quote, And should not I spare Nineveh, that great city, wherein are more than 60,000 persons that cannot discern between their right hand and their left, and also much cattle? God even goes out of his way to tell us to protect trees during a war. Quote, when you besiege a city a long time to make war against it in order to capture it, you shall not destroy its trees by swinging an axe against them, for you may eat from them, and you shall not cut them down. For is the tree of the field a man, that it should be besieged by you? These verses are very convincing and might lead you to believe that animals and trees really are a higher priority than men. However, there are other verses that show man as a ruler over the rest of the creatures. Quote, then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Man is meant to reproduce freely, without guilt. Also, Genesis chapter 9 makes it clear that man is meant to consume. Quote, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth. The fear of you and the terror of you will be on every beast of the earth, and on every bird of the sky, with everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are given. Every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. I give all to you, as I gave the green plant. So thankfully, we are not forced to choose one extreme view or another. Plants and animals belong to God, but He has put them under man's rule. Man is to till and take care of the earth, but he is given the right to use it and fill it. He is not to hurt or destroy trees and animals unless there is a good reason. This precious balance is summed up nicely in Psalms chapter 8, verse 6, quote, you make him to rule over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, and also the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, and the fish of the sea, whatever passes through the paths of the sea. And combining that with Psalm 115, quote, the heavens are the heavens of the Lord, but the earth he has given to the sons of men. God's plan is plainly with man, not with the trees and the animals. And the earth is in no danger of being filled up with people in the year 2020. But this gospel message, this good news message, this word of God, this promise that He gave us, this does not sit well with the idol-pushing one-worlders. As we said before, their agenda is to create a crisis that needs a global solution. The Club of Rome is one such group that pushes climate crisis, population crisis, and any other kind of crisis that they can think up in order to push their one world agenda. In his excellent book on this subject entitled The Creature from Jekyll Island, G. Edward Griffin states that humanity has become the target. He says, quote, the Club of Rome is a group of global planners who annually release end-of-world scenarios based on predictions of overpopulation and famine. And what is their solution to overpopulation? A world government to control birth rates and, if necessary, apply euthanasia. It says, the Club of Rome has concluded that fear of environmental disaster could be used as a substitute enemy for the purpose of unifying the masses behind their program. In their 1991 book entitled The First Global Revolution, we find this, quote, in searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself. We also looked at the carrot on the stick that they dangle in front of us, promising us utopia, with no crime, a fixed climate, fairness, equality, justice, and no disease. But we said that the side effects and the trade-offs that would come with this 2030 agenda are essentially the same ones we would get from an invading army. Looking around the world, we know that clean environment comes with extreme taxes, which was one of the things that hastened the fall of the Roman Empire. We know that fixed climate means throttling back of travel and no more airplane rides. This is reminiscent of the Third Reich and your traveling papers that you needed. No crime reminds us that they want a track and trace 24-hour surveillance system that reminds us of East German Gestapo days. Less people obviously means forced birth control, forced abortion, and sterilization. This reminds us of communist China and the Nazis. Equality means eugenics and also outcome-controlled opportunity policies, like in the USSR and communism. Peace means submission to the state, which reminds us of countries like Iran. Equal education means limited access to information and the deliberate dumbing down of the population, like in North Korea. One religion means worship of the state, like Rome and Egypt. The wilderness preserved means forced, crowded city ghettos, like the Nazis had. Now they will be referred to as smart city integration. One language means certain cultures, languages, or traditions are made illegal, like the Kurds in Turkey. Wealth equality means limited freedom to earn or invent. Another example of communism. Dependency on the state, renting from government corporations, not owning. This is called fascism. Diversity means masculinity will be maimed, making us like eunuchs, with only politically correct language, culture, and history allowed. There will no longer be many colors of free thought, free speech, free printing, and free religion. There will be only one non-offensive gray mud, like at the Tower of Babel. It will come as no surprise that the Jesuits and other socialist ecumenical groups are allying with the United Nations and billionaire-funded socialist political NGOs to pressure all levels of government to enact legislation and guidelines designed to wage war on family, on tradition, on religion, on property ownership, on patriotism, and on the inalienable rights that are currently retarding or stopping their agenda. The Bible predicts a coming together like we have not seen since the Tower of Babel. Quote, "The waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages," says Revelation 17, verse 15, about the shift to a big brother government beast. Quote, "God has put it into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand over to the beast their royal authority until God's words are fulfilled." As the director of the UN World Health Organization said in 1991 in the SCP Journal, quote, "To achieve world government, it is necessary to remove from the minds of men their individualism, loyalty to family traditions, national patriotism, and religious dogmas." So join me next time as we look at some practical advice and ask the question in Mark of the Beast Part 18. Why should we care?